Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, hey, hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ban
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. Well, the revisit just keeps coming. We made it to Infinity War. It may seem like nothing to you guys, but this has been weeks in the making, months in the making to try to record this episode.
It's true because we've had to obviously delay it for things like Black Adam and all that kind of stuff. And we got into and as well as the Guardians holiday special. So we're here. We're
finally here.
And I'm excited. I'm always excited to hear your thoughts on this particular movie.
Sure. I feel like more so than the first Avengers, this feels like quite an achievement. Even just watching it when I did earlier this week.
Absolutely.
I didn't part of me, like, I remember when we first talked about it, it was kind of like, oh well, yeah, it's not a perfect movie because it still relies on all those other movies. I don't really feel like that would stop it from being perfect at this point, like just from how many other movies we've seen from the MCU. But I still maintain, yeah, like I think the big thing that stuck out for me was like people didn't really, not, I shouldn't say people in general. I heard critics talking about how they didn't really believe the Star-Lord and Gamora love story. And I think that is kind of more what I meant about like it relies on you knowing stuff. Like the fact that Guardians 2 came out relatively soon before Infinity War. Like it's just, I don't even think there's a year between them. But it takes place in 2014, meaning it was 4 years in between Guardians 2 and the events of Infinity War. So like you kind of have to just know that when you see them like obviously say I love you more than anything in the world, like that's not just written in there, like it's obviously because over time they got to a point where they would say something like that.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that they would nitpick at something like that in the sense where like there's so much more of the movie where you're just told you have to believe. Like the first thing I remember from a scale perspective seeing this is like, oh yeah, we just got to believe that he has the Power Stone. We just got to believe that he wiped out Xandar, and that's completely off screen. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's what we got to deal with. But a critic coming to this is like, oh yeah, that's whatever. They're putting like it's a weird thing.
I think it does matter. That's what I'm saying. Like I can see why people would dig the movie. It does matter because a lot hinges on their love, like not just you. Otherwise, you just be going through the motions with the movie. You do need to buy that it is a big deal what Peter is being asked to do by Gamora.
Oh, absolutely.
That he isn't just a booty call or like the annoying guy from the second movie. You have to believe that he is being asked to kill the love of his life. Like I think that is important. That is something to ding if you're going to ding it. But as I said, like it's like, yeah, they did like the Xandar thing. It happened off screen, and it would stick for people. I can see that, but I don't have that issue obviously because we love watching these movies and learning about what goes into them, and obviously take the time out of our day. And I'm not saying other people have to, but we do take to be like, okay, well, when does this line up in the, history of the MCU? So that to me, I can be like, yeah, I believe that after 4 years, if they're still together, that they love each other that much. Whereas someone could be like, what, they just were like kind of getting together 2 movies ago. How come they love each other all of a sudden?
Yeah. I mean, it's really weird that they would just not go with the things that you're just given, right? And they're just, I'm questioning this.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it, right? Like, do you want answers or do you want to be angry? I think it's a big thing for Marvel. So by no means am I saying like it's a perfect thing. You can't be angry at it. Like you could be angry, but also then you're just angry and there's no real conversation there.
Mhm.
In my eyes, like there's no real discussion to be had. You just were mad that something happened in a Marvel movie.
Yeah. I feel like it's hard to critique this movie for those critics that have no sense of this, or like just um
Well, the critic I'm thinking about talks about comic book movies
that's
specifically.
that's really just upsetting. But I mean,
Well, I think they missed the
sure.
mark on a lot of things. They're also the same person that said that Black Panther, the first one, is a movie where the main character doesn't want anything.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
completely obtuse.
Yeah.
It's not that he doesn't want anything, he's struggling with that decision. It's
Yeah.
just ridiculous.
So yeah,
Ridiculous.
that's just what I mean. But it's not like he was alone in like picking up the love story. But I again, I
Mhm.
think that's what, as you said, it's hard to critique the movie. I think from our point of view, even because it is so set up to reward you for paying attention and going the extra mile.
Mhm.
So if someone said they didn't like it, I think we kind of came to that conclusion when we first talked about it.
Yeah. I
But it
mean,
came up even more during this rewatch because now we're living in the time where every director or actor who somehow hasn't been in a Marvel thing yet wants to
Mhm.
shit on Marvel. So like it feels like you have to be a bit more defensive, and I'm trying not to do that on this
Mhm.
episode. But like the first episode, I think we're kind of like, yeah, I can see like if people were just kind of like, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. And I still stand by that. But I mean, like you said, at this point where everything's basically an episode within something, it's just like, okay, do you fully know what's going on within some story? Because uh for some people they might not understand what was going on for Ant-Man before
Mhm.
like this, you know what I mean? Ant-Man 2. And I still believe that those people can buy into the characters. Now, do the characters get enough time to flesh out? No, but I feel like you would be able to look at that and be like, okay, this is a different kind of flesh out. It's just Avengers scale. So you're just, again, the information is just dropped and you have to take it because you're right. It is a very exclusive kind of property in the sense where if you paid attention, it rewards you heavily.
Mhm.
But then there's sometimes where I can really imagine it's like, oh, if I didn't do my homework before watching this movie, which is a big ask for a lot of people,
Yeah,
that
I would
they
agree.
would be like, oh yeah, I forgot who these characters who's this person again, and just like pull them completely out. Like I get that.
Mhm.
I get that. But also for the critic at the time, why would they not refresh themselves on the memory for the other movies, knowing what this movie is about? You know what I mean?
I mean, they went to do the whole like what is it, like 24-hour marathon where you like just watch all the movies leading up to the next Marvel movie. I believe they can't do that anymore because it just is impossible. But I think
Yeah,
Infinity War was probably one of the last ones where you could just go at one point and just watch all the movies, take a
oh,
little break, and then
oh,
watch.
so
Yeah,
that's easy. They were delirious. Great. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they didn't do this review right after walking out of the movie though. But yes.
No, I understand, but still, like I'm like one thing I under like at the end of watching a marathon and watching the new release something, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I have the legs in me to
Yeah,
put the
I try
same
to
level of
avoid that.
attention in. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I like to do it the day before because you know what
Uh-huh.
I've noticed when I did that with Star Wars releases, where the whole day I'd watch Star Wars up until the release and then go watch the release. I'd be like, yeah, I'm exhausted right now
Hmm.
from Star Wars.
Yeah, that
So
makes
it's
sense.
just it doing it immediately after a movie marathon, especially MCU. Boom, that's
That's
big
that.
ask. Big ask. You're going to be skewed one way or another. I can guarantee. Delirious is the
Um,
word.
but yeah, in terms of I think other than I think Vision might be the only weak point for me in the movie because
In what way?
I just do not care for anything that happens with him specifically. I think Wanda benefits from having WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
Um, which is to say, they both kind of benefited from WandaVision, but then I saw
Mhm.
her again in Multiverse of Madness, so I'm like still kind of like, yeah, yeah, like this movie informs a lot of what happens in WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness, even though people like to pretend she only turned bad in Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
Um,
It's ridiculous.
but yeah,
Ridiculous.
so that part, but yeah, for whatever reason, I'm just like, oh, like it's very clear they need to be like, well, Vision can't be at 100% for this, but it sucks because it's in
Mm,
a movie where everyone's at 100%. Like
mhm.
I just remember one of my main things coming out of it, and even rewatching it, it was like, wow, like Iron Man really came to play in this movie. Like this
Yes.
is, I know that the Russos talk about it being more of a Thor movie, which like I do understand how they truly used Chris Hemsworth to like drive
Mhm.
like, it starts with him. He's the one that doesn't go for the head. Like it does
Yeah.
feel like if we're talking about the Avengers, not Thanos, it's his movie,
It's
but
very personal for him, like the most
very
personal for
personal.
him. Yeah.
Yes. And I would even argue Rocket, but okay, I can get into that later. But like, I
Mhm.
think that just it feels like it's the best of Tony Stark in terms of not necessarily being reactive, but like proactively having all like some people might be like, oh my God, of course he has an answer for that. But like,
Mhm.
I feel like it evens out by the fact that he loses at the end. So
Mhm.
it was really fun watching him clearly have learned from a bunch of stuff and be ready to go when
Mhm.
this threat happens, and you see him work through things. And yeah, like I really liked when he was like, actually, I don't think we should go back home. I think
Mhm.
we should take the fight to him. Like it felt like sound logic, and it felt like the a very, I wouldn't say the best. I don't know. I still feel like I really like him in Civil War, but like this is like a very good use of Tony Stark as
Mhm.
the guy that like you already knew this was his fear. And so to
Yes.
watch him not really like initially get caught with his pants down and be like, no, no, like I got the nanotech. I like Spider-Man's falling out of the sky. I got
Mhm.
him too. This is, I've got, I know what I'm doing here,
Yeah.
or like I have a plan.
I, I I see so much of that in the rewatch, knowing that when the way he reacts to everything, the way
Hmm.
what you're pointing out is like, okay, he's just calm after the initial hug, after he sees Bruce, processes the information, starts strategizing basically.
Yeah.
And
We see him
it,
like stretching, like he's like, all right, ready to go. Look, let's do it.
exactly. And even one of his verbal responses is like, it's happening. It's you know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like he says something to that degree where it's like, oh, the time is now, or something like that. So he's, and for the people to be like, oh, of course he has an answer for that. I'm like, well, yes, yes,
Yeah, well, I don't
because
know if that is a, I don't know if that, I like, I would be hard for me to take that criticism seriously after
mhm,
him being the beginning of it. So you were at that point used to him for 10 years.
right,
So he should be ready to go.
yeah. I feel
But
like
yeah.
I feel like if there are solid criticisms in this movie, it would be against legit filmmaking things as opposed to actual plot points for someone that's, you know, it's weird,
Like the
or
look of
for
it or
them,
whatever.
exactly, or like if something fundamentally changed from the comics and they didn't like it. Like I get why people would jump on the Taskmaster bandwagon. I get why people would do a
I
whole
mean,
lot of
I
like,
don't
well, I
actually.
get why, because if that character meant a lot to them,
I've
then for
literally
the
never heard
reasons,
what I would say to
right.
that is I feel like it's very like, again, we're talking about how we consume this stuff. We're pretty clear on how people feel about characters. Like
Yeah.
the two of us. I don't think either one of us could say we had anyone talk about like I can't wait till they do Taskmaster or the Task. I think they didn't like the female led movie and they wanted to be shitty about it.
They did want to be shitty about it, but then there's other movies that, you know, we could list off that these people have jumped on the wagon for that. Okay, for example, the gore thing. I legitimately am like, yeah, rewatching Thor, I'm like, I do have a problem with gore, how they kind of
Yeah,
changed it
that's
from the
different
source
because
material, and that's a genuine,
there's
legitimate
stuff in the
critique.
movie that because they change the source material all the time, so I kind of don't
Of
really ever
course.
care about that. But I think within the movie, as we talked about, like
Mhm.
the showing and not, or not even showing, sorry, telling and not showing stuff
Mhm.
is bad like already. So if you already did like the character
Mhm.
and going into it, I heard a lot more people excited about Gore than I did hear about being excited about Taskmaster, just like for the record. Like,
I do
um,
know that, but
yeah,
I'm saying like I get those criticisms more than I get about the specific things within the Avengers, because at this level of ensemble, you just have to be like, okay, things are just moving and you have to go with it. But you're right, like Tony is so well prepared for it. A criticism I do kind of agree with on this rewatch is the nerfing of Hulk and how, and not only just like,
Oh
oh
yeah, I
yeah, they
forgot to
took
say
him out of the movie.
I don't like Bruce Banner in this movie. He seems like
Right.
they wanted to do comedic uh relief, but I also
Yeah.
understand how this was the beginning of our, like the same way I understand with hindsight that this is the beginning of something like life changing for Wanda. I understand it's a beginning of something life changing for Bruce as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in this movie, in a vacuum, I do not like it. Like, even
Yep.
knowing where it goes, I'm just like, I just wish there was a better way to do this. Because yes, I'm not a
Hmm.
fan of what happens. I don't really see it as nerfing because before they were doing press about it, I was like, oh right, like Hulk is just like, I'm not coming back. I got my ass handed to me. I'm not. And then they're like, no, he just doesn't like being Bruce's like loaded gun. And I'm like, that sure I could read into that, but that's not made clear in the movie itself that that's what the issue is.
Yes, that's yeah. I guess when I talked about the idea of nerfing him, aside from the power thing in this movie, is the idea that they severely underwrote his character within the context of this movie. But like if you look at the character's development arcs over multiple forms of media, then yes, we got something good. But is that well done in this, or is the
Yeah, I agree
overall
with
good?
you. No, I agree with you that it's not well executed here, especially
Mhm.
when you hear what the writer's intention was.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, maybe
that's
you
not
should have
good.
kept that to yourself. I don't know. Well, just because, like, again, I've rewatched this a bunch of times since we first reviewed it,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
like, sure, I could see how. I just feel like you should state it in the movie that he's upset with Bruce for like feeling used, because it just looks like he's like, I'm not cooperating, and that invites people to have their own interpretations instead of just making it clear what the issue is.
Mhm.
And the only reason I think it's weird is because the writer said what the issue was instead of leaving it blank for me to be like, oh, when I see that he melds everything in Endgame and continued into She-Hulk,
Mhm.
it didn't really matter what the issue was. It was that they were at odds and that they needed it. But then you named it and not in the movie. So
Mhm.
then you take that away from me. It's like, I agree with you that the more than the Vision stuff, the Bruce stuff is weird because it's so in your face. Whereas Vision,
Yeah.
you could kind of like, other than obviously the ending, you could kind of forget he's in it.
Oh yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
you
because
don't
they
forget
have to
about Bruce
sideline
and the Hulk.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like they have to sideline him and they have to sideline Hulk, and they have to like sideline Wanda by proxy, just like oh in grief kind of feel like she can't. Even when Okoye is
But
like,
I
where
feel
was she
like
up there the whole time?
the Wanda stuff is at least explained to me through her, the love of her life is hurt, so she's tending to that and she's distracted as
That's what
opposed
I
to
mean.
like,
They had to take her off like
but
the
she still
whole.
gets to do some good acting in that. Like
Oh God,
you
yeah,
still
she
feel like
does.
there's good character stuff in there
Hmm.
as opposed to the like Vision stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Um so I do see a difference there. Like the sidelining there out of necessity still works within the movie. It doesn't feel as obvious as the Vision stuff.
Yeah. So I do have a question for you because there is one character I was wondering about. How do you feel about the Bucky stuff in this? Like, do you think he gets the right amount of screen time, or like,
Yeah.
given the fact that he's just like, oh, he just got cured by Wakanda and is now like first mission back? Like, do you think he gets enough screen time for that, or like
Yeah.
with this Steve reunion?
I don't think any time needs to be spent really
Yeah, fair enough.
on Bucky.
Hmm.
Um I thought it was great that he got his own show. Well, not his own show, that he co-headlined with Falcon,
Yep.
to really beef them up and break
Hmm.
them out of just being Cap's sidekicks. But
Right.
in this movie, do not, I don't even know where a Bucky story would go. It's so not about Bucky. He's just on their team. So
Hmm. Hmm. Because, and I do remember the Russos saying something like this is like, I think someone asked them, well, why does Cap have so few lines in this? And they're like, well, they realize, and they replied with, we realize the more you write Cap's lines, the more it becomes about him, and it's not about him. So we had to kind of just keep him quiet. So I wonder if by proxy that means they didn't have the whole like, oh, giant reunion thing between him and
Well, they have the
whatever.
reunion.
But he had the reunion with
And I
him
think
in
that
two.
there's
That's
space
fair.
to believe that if
Hmm.
Steve felt comfortable enough going to Wakanda, that it's not the first time he's been back since he left Bucky there. So I don't
That's
think
true.
that it really would be, again, that goes into the Guardians and not like I think
Right.
that's kind of stuff is implied.
That's fair.
Like I don't need a big reunion because I don't believe that's the first time
Mhm.
they've seen each other since he left him in Wakanda.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, they got the big reunion, and well, Steve got the big reunion in two, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
And
at
that I
that
mean
point, and I get where Bucky's coming from. It's like, hey, I just healed from all this trauma. I'm
mhm.
not exactly energetically at my best, but I will pull myself together for this fight. I get that.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean I try not to. I know I already brought it in with the writers, but like, and
mhm,
I'm not saying let's never bring them up again, but I find bringing in what the Russos and Marcus and McFeely said about these two movies in particular
mhm.
derails the conversation. I don't, they
Yeah.
don't ever seem like they agree on what was happening, and I feel like some of what they say contradict. Like, sure, I'm sure if I did the math, Steve doesn't have that many lines, but it doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like he's
So he gets
talking
a
all
lot
the
of
time
screen
when he's on.
time.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
on screen, he's talking like he's. I'm my one of my friends. Rewatching it this. I was aware of it this time, so my friend was wrong, but he said, "You know what I don't like is that when they were in Wakanda, Steve spoke first when they were entering, as if it was his country to like speak on behalf of,
Mhm.
and even though he does speak before T'Challa, it was actually Nat that speaks first, and I was just like, it would I felt like he was really on something there, but then at that point I'm like, whatever, I get it. They were doing their
Mhm.
quips. Um but yeah, I don't ever it doesn't that that question about how come he has so few lines sounds like someone who wasn't swept up in the movie, and I definitely was
Mhm.
swept up in the movie because
Yeah.
at no point am I going, hey, how come Steve got so little screen time? Like I love when he shows up. I feel like, wow, that's
Mhm.
amazing. Like what a great entrance. Like
Mhm.
the three of like him, Nat, and Sam. Like I love that musical cue. I always listen to it when I go on walks. Like I think that's a great scene, and then it just
Yeah.
keeps going from there for me in
Yeah.
terms of Steve. And I feel like
Mhm.
everyone always references when he meets Groot and he goes, I am Steve Rogers, or oh, see, you got a haircut. Like
Mhm.
he has a lot of memorable times. So to then be like, how many lines did he get compared to Iron Man? I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't really seem
Mhm.
relevant.
Mhm. I mean, I yeah, yeah, they do say a lot of things that contradict themselves, but it's
Yeah.
just it's
Like they
funny
don't even agree
because
on the time travel stuff. I feel like at that point, I know we're not there yet, but like at that point, it just made me be like, I don't really care what they say.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Because if you can have that much dissension within the team making it, so no one actually agrees on what was supposed to happen, you
Mm,
might as well leave it up to fans' interpretation.
yeah, fair. That's a fair point. Um, I love the attention to detail with the vest thing. Just seeing the vest with
Oh,
Natasha
yeah,
and
yeah,
knowing
you're
that
talking about
it's
the Black Widow movie,
Yelena's.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a nice touch that they just put, like, it's a nice touch in this movie that they wrote backwards, which I think is really, really fun that it became such a good big bit, but seeing
It's
it
so
now,
weird
knowing
that
where it
like,
comes from, it's
yeah,
nice.
it's so weird that I like Elena so much, but I did not remember about the vest at all. Like watching it did not come up for me at all.
Well, I feel like that's a very specific thing within a movie that was very, very mediocre. Like, there's so
Yeah, I
much
don't
more
think
to
it's a
like about
mediocre movie,
Yelena.
but yeah.
Yeah, it's so much more to like about Yelena in that movie than the vest thing. But it's just seeing the vest in this movie is a nice, like, little Easter egg. Again, for those that really pay attention, especially the
Mhm.
writers in those that are like, oh, we have to. That was weird that they're like, oh, we have to explain the outfit choice here. Like, it's a vest.
Yeah, I mean
I'm like,
that does
whatever.
feel like a big part of franchise storytelling is
Yeah,
explaining where people got stuff from.
fair enough.
Um,
Which I
I'm
don't
not.
hate.
I'm again. I don't say that to defend it. It's just like, yeah,
Right.
that
I
can be
just don't
annoying
hate it
sometimes.
because it's
Mm.
like, oh, here's the lore behind a certain item. I'm like, that's fun to me. That is pretty
Yeah, I mean,
fun.
it connects. It makes Yelena a part of this movie now, which is a bonus.
Well, yeah, very, very minimally, but yes.
Well, I mean, it was enough for you to bring it up here. I didn't even remember it.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where the rewards keep paying off in this movie, I feel. Like there's future awards that they didn't even release yet. That they're like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
let's do this fest. Um, it's a cool little detail when you look back at it like that. Or at least for me, I noticed.
Yeah. Um, back to you reminding me that I didn't like the Bruce stuff. I also didn't like that they kind of just let the Bruce and Tasha stuff sit there. Like, almost feels like it would have been better if they just never brought it up.
It's much more awkward this time around, for sure.
Yeah, like
I'm
that it
like,
ends
oh,
with just Sam
right.
being like, "This is awkward," and then we just don't get any payoff to that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, you named it. So there's emotional like letdown from that.
Yeah,
They're like,
so we
yes, I
are.
agree with that, and which is a good feeling. But then ultimately we're reminded that it doesn't get brought up ever again. And you're just like, oh, okay then, yikes.
Yeah,
And I guess she's gonna, well, I mean, not to bring up the next, but like, yeah, it's a brutal thing. It's, well,
yeah,
this
it's
is
just.
awkward.
I mean, I would assume a bunch of stuff was cut, but I feel like
Yeah.
that could have also been cut because,
Yeah.
or even just cutting that was awkward because you could argue like maybe that was just a Scarlett Johansson choice for how she said, "I think you look," or the way she said hi back to Bruce,
Mhm,
and Mark Ruffalo's lines off screen, so you don't really see. You can
mhm,
hear it in his voice, obviously, and it helps that they add, or not helps, but you're drawn into it with Sam saying this is awkward. But
mhm,
since Mark Ruffalo is off screen, his line reading could be left up to interpretation again if you just had that exchange,
mhm, mhm.
and you
Like
could
I
just
wish.
acknowledge yeah, like they're part of the original six, so they
Mhm.
would have an exchange after seeing each other.
Yeah.
But the this is awkward part makes you be like, oh right, because they had a relationship going in
Or a
Avengers Ultron, and
semi.
we're just not gonna talk about it ever again.
Yeah, and he ghosted her basically. And this
Yeah,
is awkward because we were coworkers.
yeah,
Yeah,
because like
that's
they don't
gonna.
even.
I
Yeah,
wish what he did in that, and I wish I prefaced this by saying I wish, because when I watched that I was like, yikes. I wish he would have said something like, hey Nat, I think we should talk sometime. And then they could have left it at that. I'm like, okay, fine.
yeah. Then you could
But the
just like,
fact
I
that
guess
at
they just
least,
talked about that it's over.
yeah, at least have him acknowledge the depth of the ghosting
Yeah,
emotionally.
because they as you said they named it, which
Mhm.
they didn't do with Vision showing up to
Yes,
be taken care of by the person that he shot out of the sky. So it's
correct.
like they could have just dealt with it that way. Which even there, at least you get to see their faces, and I can infer a bunch of stuff. Maybe it wasn't there. I don't. It
Mhm.
doesn't ultimately matter because they didn't shine a light on it. So, but as someone who like feels like he needs to dig into something, I could be like, I feel like you can see a look of like I'm over it, like or like at least silently acknowledging each other of like,
Yeah, like
I mean,
I
yeah, like we're gonna have to do this.
yeah, like I do like those film moments where there's like, oh, okay, it's a silent nod. You're like really leading into that.
Mhm.
Um, and they do get that minimally, at least for someone that's developing
Or
social
you could,
constructs.
or
And I mean,
because they don't shine a light on it, if someone didn't know about that, it wouldn't matter. Like
yes.
whereas if you didn't see Age of Ultron for whatever
Mhm.
reason, and then you saw it, and then he goes, "This is awkward," you'd be like,
Yes, this is awkward.
if you're like just a smart movie watcher, you'd be like, okay, they'll explain that later, then I guess, and then it
Right.
just never gets explained.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically tying off one storyline. There's like, yep, we're moving on from the potential love story that Whedon set up here. We're
Yeah.
moving on from that. That's the payoff for us, because they're like, yeah, we didn't like the direction where that was going, so we're gonna have to do this instead.
Yeah. So I mean, that just goes back to the initial point you brought up that I forgot that yeah, the Bruce stuff doesn't work in this movie for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. It's doing too many awkward things. I'm like, this is the weakest part of the movie, because we know he can be good in supporting stuff because of the limitations of the licensing of, like, he can't be solo is what I mean. Like, he can be good in the supporting acts
Yeah.
of
Also, I
stuff.
wouldn't really care for a solo Hulk movie.
Neither would I.
Yeah.
I don't think it would work. But it's
I know that they're doing it because they don't want someone else to make money off of it.
yeah,
They're already doing that with Sony, but like
yeah. I mean, Sony's
I
been doing
don't.
that with Spider-Man stuff forever.
No, that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
they're already doing it with Sony, so they're not going to do it with
Oh,
Universal as well. Like
oh, I
they
see.
don't want to
That
like
was what you were referencing. I see.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's they said like they're not doing a solo Namor movie either because
Because Universal.
he's Universal as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, why would I wouldn't watch. I mean, I would obviously, but I wouldn't be like, yes, solo Namor. Like, I
I
want to see
agree.
these characters interact, and that's what I love about these. So it's like
But I feel like
I'm not saying that it's mutually exclusive that it's a solo movie where he doesn't
right.
interact with anyone, but it's like I sure I would probably be more interested in a Telecon TV show than like the event of a movie, and it's like it's just a bunch of characters that aren't really going to tie back into this.
Because with Telecon, the thing that was more interesting was the water, like
Yeah,
the
like, don't get me wrong,
world and all that kind of stuff.
I would want Namor to be the lead of that show or whatever, but it's like
Yes.
that it would feel like more worthwhile to be like, yeah, I'll get 8 hours or 10 hours of this as opposed
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
but anyway, we're not talking about Infinity War anymore. But
Yeah.
yes, I to your point, he can be good in a supporting thing. And I'm specifically saying Bruce because I do
Mhm.
like the Hulk fight at the beginning. I thought that was a great way to like set things off.
Yeah, because
But
to
then
me that
he
was
changes.
yeah. To me it was really, really good. I'm like, oh, this is like the scale of how strong Thanos is, and he's not even using the
Yeah,
stones and all that kind of stuff. It
that's
was a
the
good way
point.
to gauge it with that. I liked it.
Yeah, I
But
thought
for
it was
the
very
rest of the
effective
movie,
because you
yeah,
know how like Thor or yeah, like when you see Thor and Hulk fight, that it's like Thor really has to build up to like
yeah,
knocking Hulk out.
yeah, like
And
he breaks
usually
a
it's a
sweat.
stalemate. Like usually it's a stalemate, whereas Thanos
Mhm.
was like as a like a surgeon on him, like just picking him apart, and you're
Mhm.
like you've never seen him flop like that, like the way he even when he was like carrying him to throw him, like you've never seen Hulk
Yeah.
limp like that before, like which is why I don't get why people are like, oh, why didn't he just fight Thanos again? It's like, well, you saw what happens if he fights Thanos, and that wasn't Thanos at his
Mhm.
strongest or even most determined.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas I don't know that Hulk, even at his most determined, is going to beat Thanos with the stones.
Right. Because if we're accepting that this is the Hulk from Sakaar, we're also
Mm-hmm.
accepting the fact that he is an infant in terms of brain space. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so it's just like,
but he's
yeah, of
also the
course he would have a
most.
temper tantrum, and of course he would refuse to come out of his room. Like it doesn't
And to
matter.
me, it was always like,
I
yeah,
get
he
that.
refused to come out of his room after he lost. He
Mhm.
got beat, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But then
It's
they're
like,
like,
no.
no, it's not that, and I'm like, oh my god.
No, I think that part is well done in the sense where it's like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
but
the
we would
Hulk
have to
stuff makes
get
sense to
there
me.
so long. It takes such a long, like his, and then within this, it's like, yeah, the character itself is to me one of the probably weaker parts, let alone just the writing aspect of it. You know what I mean? It's just because,
Well, they
yeah,
certainly
it's
wrote themselves
mishandled,
into a
and
corner.
they
Yeah.
did, they did for sure.
Um. But yeah, I think Thor is great in this as well.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
that's by design, obviously. They said they really like working with Chris Hemsworth. And as we pointed out, like it's written in a way where it begins with him and he's the one that gets to wield the axe. He's the one that's like he gets a bunch of moments to save the day, like
Yeah.
sacrificing himself to like make Stormbreaker. Then when he comes to Wakanda, that's obviously a big deal. Like you feel it. I mean, it's a scene I hate, but when Bruce pops out of the thing and he's like, "Oh, you're all screwed now," and I'm like, "Yikes!" But
Yeah.
I get the sentiment behind the line, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, like you as the audience by that point feel like, yes, okay, like things are gonna change now. Thor
Mhm.
is here. Um,
That's
so yeah, and
100%. Yeah, like the energy shifts entirely when he arrives
mhm.
on the battlefield for sure. And you're legit thinking at that point, I'm like, okay, Thor with Stormbreaker, could he against Thanos, especially with everyone else on the field there, right? Like what like yeah, it's a very, very exciting aspect.
And I really
Um
did think he won the first time. Obviously, not this time, but the
mhm.
first time I saw the movie, I was like, oh shit, yeah, he got him. Good. I was like, so like, I hope he doesn't snap. Like, and then you should have gone for the head. I'm like, holy shit, they're going for it. Good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it was, yeah, good for them. Exactly right.
but the rocket stuff I thought was great because I feel like he has another setup and payoff of the very emotional conversation he has with Thor when Thor's like,
Mhm.
yeah, if I lose, what else do I have to lose though? And Rocket says, me, I mean, or I have a lot to lose personally. Me, I have a lot to lose. And by the end of it, he loses like he doesn't know where Nebula is, so he loses everyone.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I mean, he was right about that. He did have a lot to lose, and he lost it.
Yeah.
And I just think like that's so well done for, again, carrying over the emotional beats of being like, okay, Rocket feels like he found the family he can be himself around now. He doesn't have to
Mhm.
push them away, worried that they're not going to accept him, and then they disappear.
Mhm.
And I think that also leads me to be like, that's why it's a good ending in terms of people being like, whatever, we know they're gonna come back. And it's like, but I was invested in how the people who still remain feel about what happened because they don't know they're coming
Yes.
back.
Yeah.
So like
And
watching Okoye process like T'Challa leaving still means something to me.
right.
Like, and with retrospect, even just the way Tony looks after everyone deaths other than Nebula on Titan, like those are moments that mean something to me. So like when you see Rocket saying "oh no" as Groot says goodbye or whatever, I think he says "daddy" or something like that. Like that's the important part, not the idea that yes, you as a knowledgeable person know they're all going to come back.
Yeah, it's I think the knowledge should not override the effectiveness of of what it's supposed to intend to make you feel, which
Yeah,
is, you know, you connect, you care about it then, and then
I mean,
it's
yeah,
really, really.
if that's, and I don't mean just for Marvel movies like that. For me, is what going to the movies is about. Like, is that
Of
feeling something
course.
and a connection, that emotional thing that it can do. Because I know I'm pretty sure we talked about it on the Black Panther episode, but like
Mhm.
when people were like, "Oh, we'll just take emotion out of it," like because people were talking about how important that was, and people wanted to dismiss it as something that didn't deserve a Oscar nomination. So you can listen to that episode when it comes out. But like, I just felt like, but what are you going? Like, what are you doing movies for then? Like, not, and when I mean doing, I mean like, why are you taking them in at this rate if not for the capacity for it to move you emotionally?
Yeah, at
Like
least you're
that is
emotionally
part of it.
invested or anything. It's but
Yeah,
you're right. You care about the characters and you care about where it's going to go to the degree of like even if let's say the critique now were to be like, oh, Marvel punishes you if you don't know the whole slate. And I'm like, okay, that could be valid given how many properties there are. You couldn't just, for example, watch the newest um Ant-Man movie without really knowing what's going on. Well, actually, we'll have to see about that. But
yeah, I
let's
don't know
say,
about that yet.
let's say as an example, like that's someone's critique. It's like, yeah, okay, that's valid, but you have to look at the whole slate. It's just it's it's getting to a hard part where that's you know yeah
Well,
yeah
I mean, my thing about Marvel is it is something different. Like they aren't
mhm,
trying to make, but I don't mean this in quality. I don't, but they're not making the Godfather trilogy. And
no
so I don't mean that in like, oh, they're trying to go for Oscars. I know sometimes they say they're going to go for Oscars. What I mean is they are shifting the concept for them of what going to the movies is, which is recreating the feeling of reading comics again.
mhm,
And it is more serialized, it is more like TV. So,
mhm,
my thing to that is always like, sure, you can't go in without knowing this stuff, but that's not how comics work. It's like
mhm,
you could read something and then just be like, I didn't really know what that was. And then someone tells you, like, oh, because in this, and then you go and read that. And so,
mhm,
like, if you don't want to
uh,
do that, you don't have to do that. Like and
mhm.
I know there's all the talk about what's the only thing in theaters, and I'm like, I don't think that many people are going to theaters, buddy. Like you could watch it on streaming. Like there's a bunch of stuff out there to watch.
Yeah,
Or
there's
like
options.
I just went to go see like Banshees of Inisherin and like Martin McDonough. Like that isn't Marvel at all. That was just a
Right.
quiet movie about an island off the coast of Ireland. Like you
Mhm.
can go to the movies and see other stuff as well. It's
Absolutely.
just yeah, like I don't really no one's forcing your hand that way. I understand there's a difference when people who complain about it are part of the industry and feel they can't make anything.
Yes.
But if you're just someone who watches stuff, I'm on Letterboxd. I see you people like racking up like hundreds of movies a year. Like clearly
Mhm.
you're not watching only Marvel stuff.
Yeah. It's a weird complaint for me. Maybe nothing else gets the level of marketing that Marvel does,
But
and
that
I'm like,
was
yeah, but
always the
that's
case. Like there's
yeah.
no like
I,
ever
I,
since there was a concept of a blockbuster, that was the case.
exactly. I do feel like, yeah, especially if there's the concept of a sequel, it's like you're not this idea isn't new to you about caring for
That's
the
why I brought up the
characters.
Godfather trilogy.
Yeah,
That is a
or
franchise.
Terminator.
And
Mhm.
but yeah, or Terminator, because I don't mean quality. What I mean is
Right.
those are stories that are like it's very clearly contained. They're not reaching
Mhm.
out to other properties or reaching out to the yes, this is a trilogy, but it's part of this bigger universe. Like it's like no,
Mhm.
it's just this. You can just watch this. You can watch it in order, and that's that.
Mhm.
That's not what Marvel's trying to do. So
Mhm. It's-
again, like it's hard for me to be like, yeah, I see what you mean because it's like, well, I don't really go to Pizza Hut and then complain about the lack of burgers. Like just this is
oh, I hate the
fast.
fact that there's no burgers there. I hate it.
Yeah, but I
No,
mean,
I'm
then don't go
absolutely
to.
joking. No, I'm absolutely joking.
But
That's
what I'm
that's
saying is
such a
there are
funny thing to
people
say.
that aren't joking when they say that. Like
Yeah,
they're like, oh, but why not? And it's like because that's not what they're doing.
yeah, you should have gone to Boston Pizza then.
Like, they're
You
very
could have
clear.
gotten
You
that.
could have got the pizza and the burgers all in one
Yes,
spot. Yeah,
you could have gotten that at Boston Pizza.
yeah. I think
Or complain about the fact that McDonald's doesn't have pizza anymore because that was a legit good time.
yeah.
Like I would get on that
Unless you
bandwagon
went with a
for
group of
sure.
people and then you had to wait for your pizza and everyone else was done eating.
Yeah. I just feel like that critique ultimately attacking the comic or like the Marvel movie experience or whatever. I'm like, they fundamentally misunderstand the concept of comics. So to
I
have
think
the
what they're doing
comic
is gatekeeping,
idea,
which isn't fundamentally misunderstanding what they're doing. It's just not
hmm,
liking that it's doing something else.
well, I mean, it, I guess people like to hate on the winners every now and then, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, if that's their complaint.
I mean, it's hard because I was listening to a podcast where it was ostensibly about this show called Fleischman is in Trouble. I know that this will come back to Infinity War, trust me. It was ostensibly about the show Fleischman is in Trouble. And half of it was them complaining about Marvel movies. And I was like, it's like this isn't good content to me. I came here for the deconstruction of the 3 episodes I just watched on Disney Plus, not for you complaining that you can't watch anything but Marvel movies. Because that's part of the problem as well. If someone comes to something specifically for the show and then people are just talking about how they can't do anything other than it's like, well, now I can't listen to anything other than you complaining about Marvel.
It's true.
It's like, come on, like this, it doesn't give you a personality because you hate Marvel. You just and it doesn't give me a personality because I like it. What I'm saying is we're
Hating
very
things isn't, yeah, it's never
we're very
personality.
upfront about what we do on this show. We're here to talk about the project in the title.
Yes.
Today we're revisiting Infinity War. Um, so I'm not gonna be like, you know what sucks? ABC director said this about that. Or, you know that it's like we're here to talk about Infinity War, and part of
Mhm.
that is the criticisms of it and acknowledging that they're there. But for me, I
Yeah.
just don't really care about it because I'm already sold on the concept of what Marvel was trying to do, and I feel like this is it
Mhm.
achieving it at a high level.
It is achieving at a high level. If we take the idea, just the pure idea of comic books where random characters can just pop in and out,
Mhm.
and the concept of just making movies or telling stories to that degree on a movie screen, then this property does that very, very well. And I think the transition is best when you get the Guardians involved. You know what I mean? It's just like it's such a good transition. And for those that are like, wait, what's going on? They bring you to Thor right away, and you're like, oh, I get it. So at least if you're not
Right, like
familiar with the Guardians franchise, it's really bringing you into the loop. And that's a very comic book thing where it's just like, boom, this experience that happened over here, and it crosses over with these characters. And I'm like, this movie does that so damned well.
yeah,
It
I
really,
think it
really
does a
does.
great job of being like the Guardians who got to do their own thing and were only connected because they also don't like Thanos
Yes.
mash up here, and it's a great time. Like,
Yep.
it's not the focus of the movie, but it does a great job of being like, no, the Guardians aren't just here because we needed everybody in the movie. They are so tied to this. Like, and that's when we talked about it the first time. I talked about, like, this is the first time I liked Gamora, and it sucks that James Gunn wasn't able to go as deep with her, but like, she was used very effectively in this
Yep.
movie, and I felt like I actually cared about her and thought like, oh, she gets to be an actual character now. Like, the anguish she feels when Nebula is being tortured, and it's like, yeah, they just mended this relationship, and
Yeah.
she's right back where she hated being, which was like, I get to be the chosen one, and then my sister gets torn apart. And I know that back then all she saw was a competition between the two of them, but
Yep.
it obviously hurts even more now when she's like, fuck, like, I see what was happening. I was too
Yep.
busy, caught up in my own shit, and now I'm actually able to feel for Nebula. Like, stuff like that is really great.
Yeah. She, like, even her processing the flashbacks to when Thanos first arrived and all that kind of stuff. It's such strong stuff in here
Or
with
even
Gamora.
processing when she thought she killed him.
Yes.
Just
Oh God, yeah.
The moments after that, I'm just like, yeah, that's really effective. It's
It
not,
really
she doesn't
is.
just go like, good, it's done. Like, you see that there's like just a big outpouring of emotion there.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about the Taskmaster, again, to bring up that, it's just the characters, like when they come to, it's when it's done, it's like there's relief. It's just the emotion. But in this, it's just like, no, there's actual grief. There's sad. It's everything. She's flooded by this, and it's to see Thanos then reemerge and be like, oh, I basically just was curious how you would respond.
And I feel like he's reading it the wrong way. But
well, whether or not he's reading it the wrong way, I don't know how he's interpreting it. But it's just
when
the
he says how he's
idea that
interpreting it, you're crying for me.
yeah, it kind of makes it
says that.
so. Yes, what I'm trying to say is, like, when he says you're crying for me, it kind of validates the love, and it kind of on another level makes the sacrifice for the soul stone a little bit deeper, because you
But
do
that's why
get
I
to
say
really
it's
know
important to
Thanos
point
in
out that
this.
he's interpreting it wrong. That she's not crying because she feels bad or like, oh, I killed my dad. She's been very clear. I don't see him as that. It's just the feeling maybe of freedom, the feeling like it's just an outpouring of emotion based on she completed. She might even feel a bit like, I like that stuff from Kill Bill 2 of like regret or whatever, like, which are you feeling? And I think she's probably feeling both here, but it's like, it might be like, I can't believe it took me this long to do this, or like, I don't think the tears are from, and I know what you're saying in terms of it confirming the love, but that's just in his head.
Yes, no, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's just like on his sick, messed up way. It's just like, oh, okay, it validates the love for him, and then later it kind of sells it a little bit more on Vormir when he's like, oh yeah, this is genuinely the thing I love, because of his weird interpretation of it. But like, for
I mean,
her,
I do feel like it's clear throughout the movie. I mean, there is a moment in the first Guardians where he says straight up like, Gamora's my favorite, and I was like, thanks, Dad. But like,
but to constantly
movie,
say
like,
it and to
yeah,
love,
he cares about
but
her. Like, he's like, here, do
favorite
you want
and
some
love,
food?
kind of different.
That's not as far as this is concerned, because that is
Okay.
especially, sorry, not that it's not different, but that is the point of what is happening in that storyline,
Right?
That he would conflate the two. So it's not that
Fair.
that's the flaw in the thing. It's he's conflating that he liked her better because of what she could do with actual love. And so yeah, if you loved her, you wouldn't have put her through what you put her through, or like made her what she was. But
well, I mean, we've already established that he's a very abusive man.
Yes.
So I mean, that's why I'm like, from a very twisted standpoint, it validates it. I'm like, that's why I say very twisted, because he's an abuser through and through, obviously. Because it's like, okay, he took his daughter and cut her up, gave her machine parts to make her better, and then later on, you should have killed me. He replies, it would have been a waste of parts. He is an abuser, and that's it's messed up. He's so crazily written. Everything that he delivers.
Yeah.
And
He's
when he offers Gamora soup, that is the only act of kindness that he has in the entire movie. Like it's just it's very the Gamora stuff is very effective in this. I think
I
just
really like
everything
it.
around her. Yeah.
Who else is in the movie?
How do you feel now looking back at the Peter stuff? Since we're talking kind of about Gamora and specifically the whole he screwed it all up kind of thing. Do you still agree with that, or
I'm still like a very big supporter of the idea of that there's multiple points where it went wrong. So not, I mean, it ultimately didn't go wrong because this was always supposed to be how it went.
right?
But I don't really like, yeah, I don't really see it as this is only Peter's fault. I
Mm-hmm.
think at least with Gamora, at first I was like, she could have done it, but I'm like, well, at least she tried to kill herself right when it was time to do it, and then
Yep.
he stopped her. So she was more about it than he was. But um I think everyone had a misstep here, and again, it was always supposed to go this way.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if you could, yeah, I think that's why I said it's important that you understand that they love each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you understand that, then you can be frustrated, you can be mad, but you could be like, I understand what he's going through in that moment
Mm-hmm.
when he hears that the love of his life was killed.
Yep.
Um,
True.
it's human. That's what James Gunn has always said was the point of Peter, is to be the human on this team.
Oh yeah, because he's pure emotion. Everything he does is
They
pure
set it
emotion.
up already when he's like, I'm 50% human, so the part that you don't like about me is 100% you. Like
Yeah.
that, all of that is set up and payoff. So I do, like, again, like I think that technically this is a well written movie as well. There's
Mm-hmm.
parts that don't work, but like stuff like that where you could, people like to just, be like, oh, that's just the Marvel snark, is like, well, they're setting something up for you there.
Yeah.
That he's a very human person and his emotions will get the better of him. And I can't say that every human would react that way, but again, it is important that you buy into their love for the
Yep.
Peter stuff to work. And I'm not
Yep.
saying that you should or you're dumb, but I'm just saying that is why I bring up the criticism up top of that
Mm-hmm.
it might fall apart for people if all these pieces don't actually come together. It's not really like a just go with it movie.
Mm-hmm.
There is care being put into it for you to guide you to where they need you to be.
Yeah. It's true. It's because it's very like it's yeah, it's very well done in my opinion. It succeeds at bringing all these properties together into one movie in a very, very good storytelling way, in my opinion. And I think
Yeah,
when they
so
criticize it for that, it's just like, oh, you're not getting the whole comic book aspect of this while still achieving this within the confines of a movie. It's
yeah.
difficult. You know, the thing that confuses me now, after, of course, for our listeners, this is post Loki, having Doctor Strange be like, oh, I saw 1,400 million
Yeah, 14 million
thing. Yeah.
605. Yeah.
But now knowing that it's like, okay, it's what are those variations that he saw if the king thing is like, yeah, there's just I wrote the whole thing, I'm designing this all, everything happens because of me kind of thing. It's kind of it's weird because
Um,
it's
but he already said like they addressed that in Loki. Like they said
mm,
like they didn't do anything wrong. Like the Avengers didn't do anything wrong because that was Loki's thing was how
right.
come I'm here and not the Avengers? And like why do you assume that they did something wrong? Like that I feel like that
Mm,
was all part of Kang's thing.
right. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay. Yeah,
But
his
also, yeah, I kind of just took that as I mean, I don't remember. It wasn't a show that worked for me as well as other people, but I do
Mhm,
remember that early on he points out exactly what you were talking
mhm,
about in terms of why did they get away with what they did when they
mhm.
stole stuff and did all that stuff, and they're like, that's just part of it.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not that wasn't a
what's supposed to
deviation.
happen in this
Yeah,
ultimate timeline. Fair
yeah.
enough. Maybe there's just a whole bunch of stuff that happens on Earth that like we don't really care about. This is like the meta stuff that's supposed to happen because on scale, the Eternals movie has greater impact on Earth than this, because all of a sudden you got a friggin' marble celestial sticking out of the ocean
I
in
mean,
the
does that
Earth.
have an impact? I don't feel like that's been addressed at all.
It hasn't been addressed, but that's what I mean. It's in terms of like, oh, geographical impact or whatever. Like, it just the scale of what it would actually do. I'm like, oh, scale
Yeah,
wise, that messes around with the world much more. But yeah,
sure. As I said, I don't really think about that movie.
yeah. I
And the
I don't know why I keep
move,
bringing it up.
yeah, things that came out after it didn't really think about it either.
Yeah, you know what? Enough. Yeah, fair enough. Um, the Wakanda stuff. Every single time it comes into this movie where they're like, you're seeing everything stacked up against them,
Hmm.
and they get to Wakanda. There's such a big relief there. I feel like that's just my emotions this time. Just getting to Wakanda, like, and I will never not love the whole flying through the mountain thing and the
Mm.
hologram. That is just the
When it's like
coolest entrance
you
ever.
better be right about this, or we're gonna land a lot quicker than you think.
Yeah, it's just such a cool visual thing. It's just, oh, I love it.
Yeah, I don't really love that their people got killed off that way, but
That's what I don't love.
I
Yeah,
think when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, like half the population got snapped. So like
half the
I know
world
that they
universe or
probably
whatever.
lost more because those people weren't part of the snap that got killed, but
Right.
I mean, it was going to be shitty for them regardless. At least they knew what they were up against this time. Like they weren't. It didn't just happen without them understanding what was going on.
Mhm.
But yeah, the Wakanda stuff. I feel like was there because they were like, I don't know, this will probably be important after because of when it came out, like 3 months after
Mhm.
uh Black
But I
Panther.
mean, also acknowledging that technologically they are the most advanced nation in this universe for the MCU. So it's like, yeah,
Yes.
they and of course that first initial like dome thing where they're like, they fly a thing into it, like a missile or something, and that dome just protects them. And Bucky's
Mhm.
like, I love this place. It's like, yeah, I understand why they would do this fight here. It just sucks that they are also doing this fight here
Yeah,
because they're going to destroy this. It it
that is a
sucks.
bummer.
I yeah, watching the whole Wakanda fight scene, it is brutal watching those demon things just tear
Yeah,
themselves up. It is wild watching that again.
it was. I like that shot where like the airlock is opening and they're kind of like
Yep.
ready to go. That's a good
And then
shot.
it's just, yeah, it's kind of like open the gates of hell and flood them
Hmm.
all in. It's interesting that they got to just dig under with the round the circular things, the shield though. I guess that would make sense that they wouldn't really have the defenses
I
go
guess they
under.
started. I don't think any of them
Yeah,
got in. I think the only ones that got in were the ones that were willing to just go through the force field.
yeah, sir.
Um, but yeah, the point of being they were unstoppable.
They were
They
unstoppable.
weren't going to be deterred by death.
Mm-hmm.
It just I do think that it sucks hearing T'Challa be like Thanos will have nothing but dust and blood. I'm like, yeah, I don't know why you thought that was a threat.
Yeah,
He's gonna dust you guys and kill some of you guys, so he's gonna have both dust and blood.
yeah.
And like, I'm glad the villains were like, poor choice of words. They were just kind of like, I mean, we've got blood to spare, buddy.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Those ships, knowing
Yeah,
how many like of those demon things are
and
there.
then they just keep
God.
coming in the next Avengers movie.
Mhm.
It's like, wow, they got a lot coming. But yeah, I think for me, there's the two things that don't really work for me, and one of them, the vision stuff, is kind of just like whatever. I don't. It doesn't really keep
Mhm.
me up at night. But I think this time around, especially the Bruce stuff, really stuck out. I know the first time I
Mhm.
didn't like it, but I just thought like, why is he being like the comedic relief?
Yeah.
And I think the first time I remember also being like, oh, the Hulkbuster, it's just Bruce in there. Like I thought it was gonna be someone cool, and then
I did too.
and
That
so
was a big
obviously I'm
point of
over that at this
speculation for
point.
sure.
Like it's not
Yes.
something that still bothers me. I'm just like, eh, I, I don't like him. And like especially when he trips, like they save it with Okoye's reaction, but I'm just like, I could also have gone with that not being in the movie.
Yeah. because
The,
then
the
at that point,
Okoye reaction is amazing, but also like I don't need it.
yeah, because at that point it's just like, yeah, why are you here? It feels like
Yeah,
you're more of a liability. It feels like they were
exactly.
right the first time that they just sent him away after he couldn't turn into the Hulk in front of
Yeah. But yeah, I think that
Strange.
stops it from being like a top tier. I mean, it is top tier still, but it's not up there for me.
Fair enough.
Because of that. And obviously, we're talking about the difference between like perfection and like, yeah, there's some stuff that I would work on.
I mean, accepting that, do you think like any Avengers movie can truly be perfect in that sense where
Yes, and we'll get to it. Yes, I do.
fair enough.
Um,
Tantalizing.
so yeah, do you want to rate this?
Oh yeah. This do you want me to go first? Because this is
You can go first.
definitely a 10 for me.
I
It's a
figured we would get there for you
yeah,
finally.
100%. It's a 10 for me on the rewatch.
And this is a 9.5 for me.
Yeah. I'm willing to look past the Hulk stuff
Yeah.
now, knowing where the payoff is with the character and where it goes.
Yeah.
But on the first watch through, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It does this time, but I'm willing
I
to
think
look
it
past
sticks
it.
out every time, but not for the reasons where people are like, how come he doesn't smash things anymore? I think it's just like, why is he a goof in this movie?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
nothing about him feels grounded like the other movies. Even
Yeah.
in Avengers Ultron, where I'm like, why are they doing this love story? Like that feels bad too, and then somehow this just makes it worse.
Yeah. And oh god, it makes it the other awkward part with the Bruce thing is just like hey, when Iron Man's telling him to like just green up and he's like, you want to do it? It's like, no, but when do I ever get what I want? And then Iron Man's just like, yeah, that's right, buddy. And I'm like, that sucks to hear. That just really
But I
like
like
that.
that he's trying to piss him off.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
like
yeah,
he's
he's trying to
physically trying to do
antagonize
it,
him.
and he's speaking to him in a very specific tone to get him agitated.
You're right, he is antagonizing him.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
I think that's what I'm saying. Like he came to play in this movie, like
Yeah.
Tony Stark. It feels like he's so prepared, even in how he deals with Bruce, to be like, no, like I'm not asking you. I'm here to like bother you until you Hulk out.
Yeah, it's a very Batman type kind of situation in him
I mean,
where he's just
it doesn't
constantly
feel like
prepared and
Batman to me, only because
right.
I'm like, oh, that's his actual friend, and he knows that he needs to get him angry. It's not
No,
just
no,
to
I
get
mean,
him into the zone. It's like specifically like, hey, your whole thing is you get angry, then you Hulk
right.
out. So I'm trying to do that. And
And
I
what
know
I
you're
meant,
saying that he has a plan, but what I'm saying is it still feels like the plans for Batman are rooted in not trusting anyone, whereas this feels like he knows what he's doing. Like I said, he had a plan for Spider-Man falling out of the air because his friend got shot out of there before.
yeah,
His is out of a desperation to actually keep people safe and like keep close to the people he loves, as
yeah,
opposed to like I don't
armor,
trust that person, so this is how I would take them out. I don't trust that
yeah,
person, so this is how I do this.
yeah, because Tony's is more like I don't trust anything, so I'm just gonna build
Well,
generalized
he doesn't
armor
trust
around the
something from
world.
outside of Earth. That's
Well,
for
I
sure.
mean, yes, that's what I mean. Is like his whole thing is I don't trust. I'm going to build armor, so it's much more generalized as opposed to Batman's is much more specific in that sense, where it's like I don't trust you, so I'm going to do this and have these contingency plans. He's just like, no, I don't trust, and he just like, and to be fair, he had to prepare for the Hulk, right? That was the whole like Hulk response thing that he did in whatever where he did pull out the Hulkbuster the first time. Like that's a
Age of
Hulk
Ultron.
response thing. Yeah, Age of Ultron, right? Where
Yeah.
he's just like, yeah, he suit of armor around the world. That's just consistently what it does. Armor
All
and
right.
tech. Good
Well, we
times.
did it. We
Yes.
revisited uh Avengers Infinity War. I almost said the other movie. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. We are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Black Hole Films. So please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find our show, their show, even more shows than what I've mentioned. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, a whole bunch of places. So please rate, review, follow, subscribe, share with your friends, do all that good stuff. If you want to get in touch with us, our email is TDF. Nope, it's spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We have Twitter and Instagram at TDF Spoiled on both. And something else that you should do. Yeah, go to tdferything.com/spoiledrotten for older episodes. Yeah. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.